Day in, day out, it's the same road we're walking down, same job.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Irish Eyes. I'm here today in Rosslare Harbour, County Wexford, and I'm here to tell you the story about that doomed flight 712 Aerlingus plane that crashed off the Tusker Rock here in County Wexford, killing all 61 people on board. And this here behind me is the sea, not far from here where this plane crashed. On Sunday the 24th of March 1968, Aerlingus flight 712 from Cork to London Heathrow crashed off the Wexford coast. The aircraft, a Vickers Viscount named St. Phelim, went down into the sea just off Tusker Rock, killing all 61 passengers and crew on board. 35 Irish, 9 Swiss, 6 from Belgium, 5 were British and 2 were American on board the doomed plane. Only 14 bodies were ever recovered from the scene, and the cause of the crash has never been solved. The flight took off from Cork Airport that morning at 10:32 a.m. for London. In its final message, co-pilot Paul Heffernan said, 12,000 feet, descending, spinning rapidly. The plane eventually went down close to Tusker Rock. No black box was ever aboard the aeroplane. So I'm going to take you down, guys, as far as I can go and get as close as I can to where this Aerlingus plane crashed, went down, and there's 61 people lost their lives on that tragic morning in March 1968. I'm going to try to show you Tusker Lighthouse. It's also called Tusker Rock. I'm going to zoom in and show you just here, if I can focus this. That is Tusker Lighthouse in the distance, and I believe just to the right of this is where the Aerlingus flight 712 crashed into the sea and killed all 61 people on board. So guys, I just want to take you over here and show you. There's a plaque here dedicated to all the people that lost their lives aboard the Aerlingus disaster. And you can see on top here you have the north, west, east, south symbols on it. And just here it says, erected in memory of the 61 victims who died in the Aerlingus Viscount St. Phelim disaster off Tusker Rock on the 24th of March 1968, 30th anniversary, Rosslare Harbour Development Board.
I heard bits and pieces that set my mind working. I don't like mysteries. And then latterly, when I became a TD and got some more information, I decided that I'd go strongly into the issue to see if it was possible to establish what exactly happened. Because one of the things that has come across very strongly to me is that the fact that there wasn't closure for the relatives is a huge issue. And also, when air accidents happen and they're explained, new practices are introduced that makes flying safer.
And what was it at the early stage that led you to believe there might be something to the conspiracy theory? What was that theory?
Well, basically there was a relative of mine who was a fisherman, and he told me of a trawler taking up part of a missile in its nets. And I always felt that this should be explained properly. So the missile theory had developed from the examiner's report back in 1970. And, you know, bits and pieces of information that I started picking up led me to want to explore it a lot more, and I did that for a long period.
And did you become convinced that the conspiracy theory, the theory that this plane had been shot out of the sky by a British missile, did you become convinced that it was actually true?
I was pretty well sure of it for a long, long time. And whereas it can't be absolutely, totally discounted, at this stage it is my considered view that the cause of the accident was airframe failure. Certainly you did have drones being launched from Wales, missiles being launched, you know, to take them down and so on. Another contact that I met who had worked in Aberport and who had no axe to grind told me that 200 people would be involved in the firing. Now, in my view, if 200 people were involved in an accident, at this remove, certainly somebody would have come forward with evidence if that were the case.
This message suddenly came through, Echo India Alpha Oscar Mike, descending, spinning rapidly. And I looked at Joe, my co-pilot, and I said, did you hear that? And he said, yeah. Obviously it was almost unbelievable. Obviously it would appear the aircraft had crashed.
It came on then that the last message was 17,000 feet, spinning rapidly. Spinning rapidly is probably a death sentence, I'd say, in a plane. It suddenly came into my mind, you know, maybe he didn't get the plane. So I phoned Cork Airport. So I said, could I inquire about somebody on the flight 712? And I said, it was my brother Neil McCormick, was he on the plane? And she said yes. Then we thought, well, near Tusker Rock, you know, the water, they might get saved, they might be saved, you know.
I always feel myself, and I don't have anything to base this on whatsoever, that there was the most appalling accident by somebody, and nobody's ever going to admit that. Why would they admit it?
You know, you have to have a theory when you don't have the truth. You've got to rely on some kind of a theory to help you to understand. You know, you'd say to yourself, is it this, is it that? What happened, you know? How did it happen? And like, it's all out at sea. If you were to have a cover-up of anything, you couldn't have a better place for it.
There was a certain closure on that. I think the funeral was 10 days after the event. It was so traumatic. We were completely devastated by this out of the blue. It was a violent death in a lot of ways. It was a violent occurrence. We were lucky. We were lucky, even though we didn't regard it as being lucky at the time.
An old man down in Cove here had business down in Wexford, and he told me there's a memorial down there to the crash victims. And I said, are you joking me? You know, I didn't take any notice of it. And a couple of months later he said it to me again, so I said, God, he must be telling the truth, you know. I phoned Wexford Corporation the following morning, and they said, "Oh yeah, it's Aerlingus graves." I said, "Well, who's buried there?" Oh, she said, "Unidentified remains. St. Ivor's Cemetery, Crosstown, Wexford." I went in and turned left just inside the gate. There it was. Grave number R109. 3 graves owned by Aerlingus, leased out from Wexford Corporation by Aerlingus, and a memorial, a nice memorial to the victims of the Viscount crash, 68. And no reference, this is the thing now, no reference to any remains being buried there. You were to sort of use your imagination as to, oh, they must all be buried in there, or what? You didn't know what was. You actually didn't know. There was nothing on it stating that the remains, or any remains, were in there, identified or unidentified. It never stated that. And that, I wasn't happy about that, you know. Body was taken up. A sample would be taken, a small, very small portion would be taken to help with trying to identify that body through DNA. It was wrapped in black plastic and it had seaweed on it. It had no head. And the doctor, he took the samples for DNA purposes and sent them to a laboratory in England. And the results were unable to be processed because the body had been too long in the water.
61 people on board lost their lives when it crashed into the sea just east of Tusker Rock. Despite a massive search for wreckage and an exhaustive inquiry, the cause has never been found. The only theory which remains unproven is that the St. Phelim was in a near miss with another object or was even hit by it. The Viscount left Cork for London just after 11:30 and headed east. By 11:57 it was at its cruising altitude of 17,000 feet. It reported its position normally to Cork Air Traffic Control and was told to change frequency to London ATC. In the next few seconds, a disaster of some kind struck the aircraft. Almost immediately, it identified itself to London ATC, followed by the message, 12,000 feet, descending, spinning rapidly. Nothing more was ever heard from the Viscount. It had plunged 5,000 feet in just 30 seconds, yet it managed to pull out of the spin or dive because it was more than 10 minutes before it finally crashed into the sea 2 miles east of Tusker Rock. The search got underway immediately, but it wasn't until the following day that the first bodies were found. And it wasn't until 3 months later that the bulk of the wreckage was found in 230 feet of water. The British Navy was closely involved in the operation. Almost 2/3 of the aircraft was eventually recovered and painstakingly rebuilt in Baldonnel Aerodrome. But the tailplanes were never found. Only a small part of one was discovered. Mysteriously, it was 7 miles from the crash site. The official investigation into the report ruled out all the usual suspects: explosion, fire, turbulence, icing, and so on. The man who carried out that inquiry then focused on the pieces of wreckage which were never found.
The significant thing about it was that everything was found of the airframe except the tailplanes. And this led us down the street of a possible maneuver on the part of the pilot to avoid something.
So having gone into a dive or a spin, the tailplanes may have been damaged or even torn off when it managed to pull out of the dive. But what was the mystery object which may have knocked it off course? No other aircraft were reported to be in the area. Over the years, questions have been asked about the British missile testing range off the Welsh coast. Could the Viscount's path have been crossed by a stray missile, or more probably an unpiloted target aircraft? The Ministry of Defence says the Welsh missile range was closed that day. There were also several Royal Navy ships in the area. But the Ministry did confirm that part of a pilotless aircraft used as a target was found by a trawler off Wexford 5 years later. The eyewitness accounts suggest that there was another object in the area. At least 3 people saw or heard the St. Phelim crashing into the sea. But a separate group of people saw what seems to be a different plane. Some saw it crash into the sea, many miles from where the Aerlingus plane eventually went into the water.
So guys, I am currently in St. Ibar's Cemetery, Crosstown, County Wexford. I'm here to show you the final resting place of the people, or some of the people who were interred here, and their remains from that terrible crash in 1968 off Tusker Rock. And here we are, guys, at the memorial for the crash victims of the Aerlingus disaster off Tusker Rock in March 1968. And this is the memorial area here that was erected by Aerlingus and the corporation, the county council. We'll have a look at the names, and I'll just pan down slowly so you can read some of the names on here. And as you can see on the memorial here, it's shaped like the tail end of an aeroplane. We'll just have a walk around and look at the back area. See some seats here as well. And just up here, guys, I believe is the actual final resting place and the remains of what they found of some of those people aboard the Aerlingus flight. So we'll take you over there. And here we are at the plot where the bodily remains of those people who perished on the Aerlingus disaster are interred. And you can see someone left a lovely wreath here and some flowers at this final resting place. And we'll read this here on the monument, and it says, erected by Aerlingus in memory of those who died in the air accident off the Wexford coast near Tusker Rock on the 24th of March 1968. So I just want to say, I'll leave it there, guys, and rest in peace to all the people who perished in that terrible accident. Take care, guys, and God bless.